So I'd like to invite Professor Bhaskar and Dean Nag to the stage. And while we get started, for most of us who graduated, you guys face, I'll take this one, yeah. For most of us who graduated many years ago, that panel was fascinating. I don't think any of us had the guts to jump into startups the way this group has and has shown us, and it's a credit to the incubation center, the support IITM has had with the research park, et cetera. And over the last few years, Professor Bhaskar and Dean Nag have been wonderful and instrumental in driving the agenda forward and engaging the alumni in ways we've never done before. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open this up. Professor Bhaskar is going to talk for about 10 minutes, and then Dean Nagaraj is going to talk for about 10 minutes. Then I'll open it up for Q&A, and we're going to do this again from the mic at the center, so if you have questions, please line up. And I want to emphasize this is about questions, not comments and long diatribes about your opinions. We'll invite you to future panels if you have opinions to share. Okay, with that, let me start with Director Bhaskar.
Thank you. Finally, easier to stand and talk. So, I think I sort of every year I come to the US and I try to convey in 10 minutes or so something about what's happening. Today my job's been made easier because I think you saw since morning you've seen various slices. You've seen some faculty talk about what they are doing. You've seen absolutely stupendous slide, picture of what these 6 people conveyed to you. So, I think what I want to share is the following, that when the IITs were set up, we must, I keep going back to this because we must not forget what the IITs were set up for. The IITs were set up, if the Sarkar Committee report is worth reading, though it was actually done pre-independence. I think the idea was to actually set up institutions where you can let really, really good people bloom. That's our first and foremost goal, and I think from what you saw, you should have, you can see that that's really our, that's absolutely our, we must do that. That's something that we cannot lose sight of. And then they'll do various things. We don't have to worry about it. Each one of them will figure out how to be useful, how to be non-linearly useful, how to do much more than, give much more than what they got. And so that is one major thing. The other thing which has grown over the years is IIT's its own faculty and research scholars as a resource to attend to directly to challenges that are present today through their research, through their translational work and so on. So these are the 2 major, important tracks. And therefore, whatever we do, we try to, at least I try to keep checking whether how we are doing against these 2 goals. So the curriculum, we got to make sure that every 10 years, every few years, we keep revisiting, make sure that whatever we are trying to teach, all of us know that it's not in the classroom that we learn most of what we know. But we go through a certain process. So we try to make our curriculum as liberal as possible, as open as possible. And we've done that. I think I've spoken about it earlier also when I've come here. We've done that. And currently, the new curriculum for our undergraduates allows them a lot of freedom in selecting their courses. And that same freedom can be used actually to upgrade from a BTech to a 5-year dual degree program where the masters can be in a lot of different areas. We've just introduced that in data science, in computational engineering, in nanotechnology, and in medical technology. Some more are coming up. We're thinking of a tech MBA. So there are lots of other things, energy systems. So I think, and these are, the upgrade is open to actually, the ones we've defined up to now, which we've just announced to the students, is open to any branch. So we're sort of de-emphasizing the importance of what happens in your JEE, trying to do many things there. And the whole idea is to actually liberate and see what happens. And we'll probably have, by the time we're through with this, these programs are being defined by groups of faculty from multiple departments. Usually they are multidisciplinary. And it's market driven. If the programs are good, students will upgrade. If the programs are not good, they won't upgrade and they'll die. It's not as if you define it at the entrance JE level where people will come and take the seat even if it was a topic that nobody wanted, right? So hopefully these are programs that the students will like, that will enable them to branch out, to do things, try out things that, catch their fancy. And somewhere it'll pay off. That's our belief. We have no clue what's really going to work and what's not going to work, but general principle is to expand out, liberate, let students figure out what they want to do. We have, half our students are research scholars, masters, PhD research scholars. That's another very important group. And they are also, we are trying to make sure that very often they come with some gaps in their background because most of them are from other engineering colleges. They are good students, but they have some gaps. We have to fill those. We have to give them confidence. We have to expose them to the best environments, send them to conferences, expose them to other groups. That's why we are trying to internationalize as much as possible, get collaborations going, send these people to universities abroad, at least for a short period, to work in other groups, get others to visit our research groups. This kind of thing, because this is a very important resource. They are the people who are going into all the companies to take up core technology jobs. They are the people who are going into the academic institutions in larger and larger numbers. They're also the people who are going into ISRO, DRDO, and all these organizations. So that's another very important group of people. And so our research is very important. So we try to keep watching ourselves. How are we publishing? Are we publishing in better journals? Are we publishing better quality work? And our faculty, constantly trying to push the bar. The other important thing is translation. So you saw some of it today in medtech, in impacting industry, the kind of work that Krishnan talked about, or the startups talked about. And today we didn't have anybody here who is working on water, but energy has been talked about quite a bit. I think 10 days ago, Professor Junjanwala was here in a different forum. I think he spoke about his work, what he's driving. So all of these are very important areas. If we, for example, just that one thing, if what he's driving in electric vehicles, if that is the right way to go and if it works, then it's a huge transformation in the country. So we are beginning to take on challenges at that level and seeing whether we can help the current situation as it is, in all these areas. Education is another thing we're trying to intervene. The NPTEL MOOCs program, what we are doing is actually forming what are called local chapters in the engineering colleges. So, they're also it's not every college. The ones that are better are the ones who respond. So they form local chapters, there's a teacher, there are students, and partnering with that teacher and those students, we are running these MOOC courses. The students attend these courses in class. It's not MOOCs as in sitting at home and doing it on their own. This is just a reinforcement and sort of a added content and quality to what they are getting. And partnering with those teachers, it's not replacement for those teachers. We try to work with them and try to see how we can make their experience in those engineering colleges better. And so, I think if you talk to Andrew Tangaraj, who's driving this program, he says there's almost a new local chapter being added, or a few local chapters being added per week across the country. We don't know where it'll go, but there is an attempt at scale, there's an attempt at trying to, dream big and try to do something in all these areas, water, energy, medical. You saw today a little glimpse of from what Mohan Shankar was talking about, and construction, infrastructure. So that's one more slice, right? So there are all these different aspects, and they're all important to us. But the most important, I think, is if we are able to continuously produce people who are dreaming big, branching out, I mean, when Kedar talks about standing in the middle of a field and thinking about the other 99.9%, that's really transformation. So I think that's something we should not lose sight of. And if we do that, I think we're okay. There are other challenges. So my job is partly, the funding from government goes ups and downs. Somebody asked a question about the research funding from government. The funding to IIT also followed that pattern. 2015-16 was tough from Government of India's point of view. How to insulate the institute from that, how to smooth things out, how to raise some funds from outside, and how to generally improve the efficiency with which we use this money. There's so many things to fix, from the toilets to the general levels of cleanliness and so on. We have a long way to go. But I think, at least in the IITs, we are constantly improving and trying to do better. And incubation, research park, it's all part of the same story, right? So we have to provide these openings. I think we're now incubating a company a week. Good percentage of the companies are students and alumni, people who've just graduated and come back. You heard a story of somebody who left Goldman and came back, things like that. Reasonable number from faculty also. But again, a sizable number from people who are not from IIT, who work with IIT, like you saw a couple of examples today. So all of these are part of that story. And the last thing I want to say, is, how do you, we saw something from the morning, how do you think about India? India is big, right? The moment you say you have, 1.25 billion people, you have so many villages and so on, it's difficult for us to learn how to figure this out. But one thing we learn as engineers is to break down problems. And I would say all of you, and I would like to share with you, recommend to you, the way you can understand this is, India is 250 million families. Okay, average family size is 5, so 250 million families. So that's, 25 crore families. 25 crore families. And out of that, something like 160, 170 million are in the villages. The rest are in the cities, right? And farming is 16% of the GDP. So obviously, that can't work. That's why even when we have a drought, it's not as if our farm production goes down by half or something. It goes down only by 10%. And it's not as if we're going to have famine. It's just that so many people are living on the edge that the 10% makes a huge impact on people. There are so many people the laborers who don't get work that year. There are small farmers who don't earn enough to make ends meet. That's the problem. So we have to get at least, ballpark figure, we have to get half the people out of farming. Okay, so the number of people living off the farm has to come down from 160 million families to maybe 80 million families as a first step. The other 80 million families, which means that many jobs, that many livelihoods had to be created by which those families can be supported. In non-farm activities, in the cities, in the 200 cities that are above million population that are coming up, 150 million cities. And people will migrate, there's no doubt about it. The urbanization will happen. But also more value added in the villages themselves. But then if people have to live there, we have to make sure we can get education there. We can make, television is gone, telecom is gone to all these places. If they have the resources, they can build houses that are not very different from what's built in the cities. All that is happening. Okay, at least it's happening in Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and so on. There's no reason it cannot happen in Bihar. That's a different. That differentiation is due to a different issue. But medical care has to go. These are the challenges we have to address. How do we make that happen? And there are the remaining 90 million families which are in the cities. Then if you start looking at those numbers, then you can understand what 6 million jobs in IT mean. What does 2 million more jobs in, say, transportation, shared transportation mean? Then you can start beginning to see how this will impact the unemployment problem. So that's all I wanted. How do you think about India is in terms of families? This famous statement was Dharmendra or somebody said, "Mere paas maa hai," like that. So, "Mere paas family hai." That's one thing India has. So if you think of the families, you begin to understand how to break up the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bhaskar. So Professor Nag, you're next up. He took executive privilege, so you have fewer minutes.
Yeah, it's been a long day, and I'll try to keep this as short as possible. I want to thank all of you for taking time on a Saturday to come, and I also want to thank the IIT Madras Foundation and all the local volunteers that have put in so much time in planning and executing to make this happen. It's great to see all of you today. So we heard from a lot of startups in the previous session. And actually, in many ways, our Office of International and Alumni Relations is also a startup. But before I get into that theme, just want to quickly point out that if you listen carefully, there's one common theme that resonated in all the stuff that was said by the previous panelists, the entrepreneurs. Could you get a feel for what that was? I mean, what is the one thing that I think they all referred to? Center for Innovation, CFI. Right, guys? And I cannot resist this. I'm so proud of it that our class of 1981, when we had our Silver Union, funded the Center for Innovation. And I truly believe that was a game changer. I think that was really the genesis of this new boost to entrepreneurship that we see on campus. And it's also the type of startups that are coming out. Again, if you noticed, I think of all the startups that were represented, only maybe one was in the software domain. All the others are making products. They're actually doing stuff with their hands, building stuff, technology products. And here again, I think the CFI has been the game changer in that respect as well. People ask me sometimes, why should alumni give back? What difference can they make? My simple answer is CFI. Just come and take a look at what CFI has done for the innovation, incubation, entrepreneurship ecosystem on campus. And that's a question you will never ask again. Because I think that the value of alumni contributions, in a financial sense and in many other senses as well, is that it can be directed where the alumni want it to go. And sometimes they can make things happen much better, faster, quicker, through this kind of very focused and very targeted funding and other means of support. Could we have built a CFI anyway? Maybe. Could have taken a lot more years. So all the developments that you have seen in the past few years might have taken another decade to happen. And we would have lost a golden opportunity. So just keep this in mind. If anybody ever asks you, and I'm sure people ask you all the time, why should we give money to IIT Madras? It's a central government institution. Just say CFI, and hopefully they will understand. So I was just saying that the Dean's Office for International and Alumni Relations is kind of a startup in the sense that we started up about 4 years ago. Till 2012, we had a separate Office of Alumni Affairs that I was managing from 2009, and an Office of International Relations that Krishnan was managing until he became the Dean of ICNSR. In 2012, we figured out that actually it made a lot of sense to integrate the two offices and make it into an Office of International and Alumni Relations, and also give it the dean level visibility. And I think it's been a tremendous boost to our efforts on both fronts. As Professor Bhaskar was mentioning earlier, internationalization is very important for our students and for the institute as a whole. And here is one area where, because of the synergy between international and alumni relations, we have been able to do very interesting things. For example, students, we now have joint PhD programs with 15 universities around the world, some of the best universities, Melbourne in Australia, Aachen University in Germany, NUS and NTU in Singapore. And so the way these joint PhD programs work, the student has to spend at least 1 year at the other university. And during that time, their stay is completely taken care of by the host university. But airfare still has to be found. And students, many of them cannot afford to pay the airfare to go and come back. So we've been able to give them alumni travel grants. We cover 100% of all of their out-of-pocket expenses, which are not covered by the host institution. Anytime a student wants to go and spend time at another university to do collaborative research with another faculty member, we are happy to make that happen through alumni funding. And even faculty, we have an offer on the table, which many faculty have taken advantage of, that if they go abroad to attend a conference and they want to spend some time visiting, again, a collaborator at a university to do some collaborative work, we take care of the differential cost. Or if they just want to go to a university and spend time on collaborative research, again, as long as the host takes care of their stay expenses, we are happy to take care of their airfare, or vice versa. Just last year in 2016, almost 45 faculty took advantage of this and were able to go and spend significant time abroad. And I think all of this shows up eventually, in just every measurable metric that is used to assess how well an educational institution is doing, one that is concerned with high quality research as well. So I think the startup mode, of course, works both ways. As I think Kedar was mentioning, there are ups and downs. And we have seen that happen as well. I've had an instance where, Monday of a week, I'll be talking to some alumni and they'll get very excited about something and they'll say, send me a proposal and we'll work all day and prepare a proposal and send to them, and you won't hear from them for a couple of days, and then you ping them again, and they'll say, oh, I don't think this is the right time to do this. So in that way also, our office is in many ways like a startup. And the other way I think it's like a startup is there is always that element of uncertainty. We have a very young staff, and unlike the other dean's offices, we don't have too many IIT Madras employees. We only have one who's needed to keep us honest, in terms of making sure we do all the paperwork correctly and so on. But we rely almost entirely on project staff, contract staff to make things happen. And our office has the reputation of being extremely responsive, not only externally, but internally within the institute as well. And that's something that I certainly want to make sure remains in place forever. And I think that the mantra that I have always believed in, the philosophy that I have always espoused is onwards and upwards. So I always believe that the time to make changes is when things are going well. And to me, we are at a stage where I think our alumni relations, our international relations, our fundraising, to pick the three that are most relevant to our office, are all at an all-time high. As an example, in 2016-17, for the first time ever, we raised more than $10 million in fundraising, which is almost 40% more than what we have ever done before. In terms of total number of donors, we now have more than 10% of our alumni body as at least one-time donors, which, by the way, is a tremendous statistic. I don't know if you realize it, but that compares very favorably with some of the institutions, even in the US, that have a reputation for fundraising, including my other alma mater, which is Yale University. They'll kill to have 10% of their alumni giving back to the alma mater. Just in terms of connectivity, we have so many methods now of connecting with alumni. There is I would say about 60 to 70% of our alumni on the whole are now connected among themselves and with the institute. We are using so many different means of communicating. There's a LinkedIn group with more than 10,000 people. I post virtually daily, and hopefully I'm able to communicate with many of you in terms of bringing you all the latest developments, not on the institute front, but also as it concerns our alumni and so on. So, but again, to me, this is a baseline, which is great, but here is a time to see how we can improve on it. And this actually is one of our attempts to do so. As the director mentioned, he and I come every year. We visit various cities. Usually we have a very crazy schedule. We visit 5 cities in 7 days and try to meet with as many alumni as possible. So we thought, let's try something different this time. First thing is, we are only visiting 2 places. We are spending 3 days in the Bay Area and three days in New York. Give us enough time to really settle down and do things in depth. And also, let's bring some of our faculty, some of our young alumni, some of our students who are actually doing what it takes to make the institute great. And it's an experiment. I think this is the first time we have done a summit like this with so many of our faculty involved. And based on the feedback that we receive, based on the perceived success of this pilot, we'll be happy to do more of these. And maybe not just in the Bay Area, but maybe in the other cities as well, and maybe outside the US as well. And one thing that is increasingly becoming apparent is that our alumni base is not just India and US anymore. They're spread all over the place. There are sizable alumni communities in many countries in Europe, in Asia. Australia has a large number of our alumni. So our efforts are not going to focus only on India and the US, but we are going to try and widen our scope as much as possible. We want to, I think the 2 organizations that have been there for the longest time serving alumni is the IIT Madras Alumni Association in India and the IIT Madras Alumni Association of North America in the US. And we're going to count on them to provide that continuity. I think it's very important to make sure that chapters are energized. And in India, I think now Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, Hyderabad are all very active. And of course, I know that Sagar is making all efforts as president of MANA to make sure that in addition to the Bay Area and the New York, New Jersey chapters, we have more chapters in the US that are also equally energized. And I think as long as the alumni associations do their job, pulling the community together, we will be happy to work with them and with the foundation to make sure that the connectivity to the institute remains as strong as ever and grows by leaps and bounds every day. So again, happy to see all of you. I've had a chance to now spend almost 4 weeks in the Bay Area, and I think I've met with many of you. one-on-one or in small groups. It's been a great opportunity for me to do that, and I look forward to serving all of you for the remainder of my term. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nag. So, sorry to cut them off, but in the interest of time, I figured there are enough of you with lots of questions and a lot more content. You can see from the excitement from both Director Bhaskar and Professor Nag that there's a lot going on at IIT. And for those of you who don't know, we've been ranked #1 for the second year in a row as the best engineering institution in the country. That didn't happen by chance. That happened because of the efforts under Professor Bhaskar's leadership. Questions from the audience, and if you have any, please line up behind the mic, and you got to come in behind the mic because we are recording this, right? Anand?
I wanted to ask Bhaskar a question. So 2 years back when we launched the foundation, you spent some time explaining to us, just like you did just in back of the envelope numbers for the economy itself, how the different levels of the IIT Madras budget operates in terms of research funding, government funding, and alumni grants. Can you walk us through that? Because for a lot of the people here, that convinces them more than anything else as to why the endowments make such a big difference to IIT.
Yeah. Thank you, Anand.
Okay, so, there is a certain part of the budget that comes from the government which added to the fees, which is not much. Our total income from other sources, what we call it fees and other sources, is not more than 20%. And this part takes care of the running expenses, which is non-negotiable, the salaries, the pensions, the electricity, the water, whatever, right? Maintenance and so on. There is also a budget that comes from the government for capital expenditure. Most of it goes for construction. We're still growing. After all, we've come to 9,000 students. We were just 5,500 in 2008. So we're still growing. We're not going to be going at that rate anymore. We'll probably taper off towards 10,000. But there's a fair amount of just basic infrastructure to add, buildings and so on. And then the institute is 60 years old. We're replacing the water lines, the sewer lines, and all of that stuff. Then there is the research funding, which comes from grant, basically competitive grants from the science ministries. That, as you saw in the morning, is now about 40% of our total budget. It's of the total budget. If you add up everything, it's about 40 to 50%. 25% of that part comes from the industry. The remaining 75% comes from government. That 75% can vary a lot, as you saw. When the government really squeezed back 2 years ago, it dropped precipitously. Then we have to sort of, naturally our research gets the hit. A lot of that money, 50% of that money goes for research capital equipment, instruments and stuff like that. So that's what we cut back on if the funding suddenly drops. We manage with what we have. Then the rest of it goes for funding staff, research scholars and staff. And where the alumni and external funding helps us is, I think that if we have even 10, 15, ideally 20% of the budget available from other sources, from outside of this, that will give us the ability to make, nonlinear impact by, say, starting some new centers or of excellence, or really giving much more ability for our faculty and students to interact with others in the world, create places like Center for Innovation, all these kinds of things, okay? And these can have a tremendous impact. So the rest is sort of the concern keeps going with what the government is able to give us, but then to make these big changes. Sometimes, once in a while, the government gives money for that also. Let me tell you, this year, at least they promised an additional almost 15%, about 100 odd crores to set up new centers of excellence to really make a big difference. Now, when I say promised, what I'm saying is you never know. By the time they come to the end of the year, if there's a huge fiscal problem, they may cut back. They actually sometimes cut back on promised budgets. So we've got to be very careful how we plan our expenditure. But if they do that, once in a while they do that. But I think having money coming from both industrial funding, what we get as overheads from that for our research, as well as from donors, to be able to set up these centers to start new things like Center for Innovation, which had a huge impact, as Nagarajan pointed out. That's really the key thing. Okay.
Daniel, you're up next.
Oh, okay. So Bhaskar and Naga, I had a couple of questions.
One question.
One question, okay. Initially, IIT Madras was started with cooperation with West Germany, or initially. Now it seems a lot of cooperation is happening between US and, I guess most of it between US and India. What is the impact of Europe in all this? I mean, do they still fund stuff, and does Germany still fund stuff?
We still have a very strong relationship with Germany, but it's not a question of Germany funding us anymore. It's an absolutely equal partnership. I would say that even today, as far as IIT Madras is concerned, our strongest international relations are with Europe and with Germany in particular. For example, if you look at exchange students, we get close to 100 students every semester. At least 60 of them will be from Germany. And similarly, our students going abroad, about 50 to 60% go to Germany and a few of the other European countries as well. What has changed is the dynamics. In many ways, we now have equal capabilities, whether it comes to research or teaching or whatever. So we try to look for opportunities where we can help each other. And in fact, I mentioned that we have 15 joint PhD programs. 3 of them are with universities in Germany, RWTH Aachen, University of Passau, and University of Duisburg-Essen. So another example is the Indo-German Center for Sustainability, which was set up in 2009 when we celebrated our Golden Jubilee. Equally funded by the German government and the Indian government, equal involvement of faculty from both sides and students from both sides. I think that's basically the way we want to deal with any country, any relationship, including some of the best universities in the US. What we try to tell them is we are only interested in partnerships where we have, I would say, equal respect for each other's intellectual abilities. That has to be the basis for any relationship that we have between universities. If it starts out as a one-sided relationship, it's likely to die a quick death. So we make sure that that doesn't happen.
Thank you.
Anybody else with a question? Okay.
Yeah, this might be a tough question. Huh? I mean, like you saw earlier, there's a huge difference in the mindset of the entrepreneurs here and the young people there in terms of how they view IP, intellectual property. But that's everything in the valley, Silicon Valley. You must have intellectual property. So in that background, when I was at IIT Madras, and I think I came to your office, there's some brilliant people in Chennai who can really produce IPs of world class. I mean, they teach world class courses. I mean, they're ex-IITians who went back there to teach. And then when I tried to implement some patents there, I found there's a huge bureaucracy and some bullies. You said about blooming, but it's difficult to bloom if there's huge bureaucracy and bullies. IIT Madras has to be world class. Being best in India is no big deal. I mean, it's just your father telling the son, hey, you're my best child. And much daddy funds us and says, hey, you're the best child. Yeah. It's good, we're not the worst, but I think we can be and we should be world class. We must be rated in the world. We must put our patents at a world class, and we can. There are people there who can do that. But how do we help that? How do we let them bloom, like you said? How do we cut down on the bureaucracy and the bullying?
Who wants to take that?
Yeah, I think,
No, it's just, how do we do that? I don't know. Can we answer now, maybe?
Well, I think, we are, what he's generally pointing out is how do we learn many of the processes, many of the good practices from elsewhere. He's quite right. So I think Krishnan is still here. I think, yeah, you can answer that, what we are doing in the IP office. When anybody, I'm also Aunt Agatha's kind of complaint box. I get a lot of complaints in the institute. I take all of them very seriously. I think there's no question we have a lot of improvements to make. But let me assure you, we attend to all the complaints. So Krishnan, maybe you can tell us what we're doing to reduce our bureaucracy and reduce our bullying as far as IP is concerned.
So it's been at least 5 years since I heard this kind of a phrase with regards to IP at IIT Madras. I mean, we have really changed the IP process.
Oh, Krishnan.
What happened?
No, you can come up here.
Okay.
While he's coming up, just to clarify one point, Professor Bhaskar didn't defend that, but he's always maintained that the goal isn't to be number one in India. That's where we are now. He took the initiative, made it happen. The goal was to be in the top 20 in the world. Okay, so that's a pretty ambitious goal for an institution in India that's still coming up the ranks. And he's the first director who's put a major goal in terms of an endowment to help us make that happen. He talked about the research, the innovation, the infrastructure, the student engagement. So there is an initial 100 million target. We all know that's not enough compared to some of the global universities, but it's a start. And as Professor Nag said, we're already up at 10 million. We had a fantastic fundraise last year, and there's more coming. And so I just wanted to respond to that part of it. The goal isn't to stop at #1 in India. Okay.
Sure.
No, come on. Okay.
Okay.
That's,
So just to answer, a quick answer to his question is that certainly about 5 years ago, the IP system needed a fix in IIT Madras. Today, there is very little bureaucracy. In fact, to a point where I've been accused of being too easy on getting IPs. We have quadrupled our IP output, our intellectual property output. We also patent fairly extensively in the US and Europe. However, the real issue is cost and affordability. In fact, we have sent out a white paper to the alumni to match our funding for the IP filing in worldwide. And I think Nagarajan can probably tell me what happened to that. But certainly cost is an issue. And this is not only an issue with IIT Madras. Anywhere, anytime you file IP, it's a very expensive option. So we do very judiciously. But within India, we don't use the same criteria. So as I mentioned this morning, I don't know if you were here or not, but if you, we can, our span or time frame for protecting IP is as less as 8 hours. And we can file IP within 8 hours. And we can do it from our office. So there is no bureaucracy as far as IP filing is concerned at all. There is a cost issue that needs to be worked out. But we have been fairly generous towards that also. But there is a limit to what can be done. I'm not sure this is where that is coming from. So I would like to learn a little bit more on that. Yeah.
okay. Shishir?
Yes, yeah. Hello. So I'm from 2002 batch. I wish we had the Center for Innovation back at that time. I think it's a great concept. So thank you, 1981 batch, for getting this started. I have a question on, as an alumni, if we want to fund one of the startups at Center for Innovation, or we have an idea of our own and we want students to engage and try that with the help of Center for Innovation, is that possible? What do you suggest?
Mahesh? Or not?
Mahesh here? Yeah. Mahesh, you want to give the mic?
Yeah.
So I'll
Mahesh,
just quickly, okay, fine. All right. So I'll take the two parts separately. If you want to start a center, it's very easy. Just get in touch with Nag's office, you or your batch, put out your idea, and their office can flesh it out with the realism that we see on ground there, and the center will happen fairly quickly. And a quick example of that exact same mechanics is the Gopalakrishnan Deshpande Center that actually is now a reality. It happened in about 3 to 4 months. Okay, that answers the first part. The second part, you have an idea, you want students to come work on it. At the moment, we have a more amorphous mechanism set up for that. In other words, you should know somebody that can get in touch with the right group of students. So Ravindran is the faculty advisor for the Center for Innovation. So, and I help with our incubation cell. We don't have a systemic way like a web page where you go fill a form and somebody gets in touch. It's more on a one-on-one basis. So you can either write to Ravindran or me, and we'll try to find students who are interested. Now, I'll put a little disclaimer, a little star on that, because students come with their own interests. You can never, I'm sure you're not a parent to a teenager. You can never tell them what to do. So you should be aware of their psychology when you suggest.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally not an academic, so I mean, I don't know how much rankings matter, but since he said like it's not a big deal being ranked #1 in India, if you go by that yardstick, it's not it's neither is it like by ranked #1 by US News or whatever is that. Like, I mean, I don't even know like who ranks them in the world. But I'm really interested in if the IP part is really correct. Like, because I mean, if I'm interested in seeing a product like a bullet train or a cell phone or an airplane like that can be traced back to IIT Madras that kind of comes out in the next 10 years. Like, essentially that's world class and can be said like we invented this and this is what we stand for, like, essentially.
I think, have you visited the campus recently?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did. Like, I mean, I've been there 3 times in the last 1 year. Like.
Okay. So one thing I'd like to encourage everyone is to go to CFI, go to the research park, and see what's going on. I mean, you just got a sampling here of the few entrepreneurs we brought over here. And we're at the early stages, right? We're still at the early stages. The incubation, the research park, all of that started less than a decade ago from the original ideas that Professor Bhaskar and Professor Jhunjhunwala had, et cetera. So you're just starting to see the first signs of that coming out. And I think if you go and see, just feel the energy of all the interactions, and some of the folks I visited even 6 months ago are here in this room, it's just fabulous. I've been in startups in the Valley, watching that energy and the excitement. And as I think Professor Mahesh or somebody said, or I think Professor Nag said, a lot of these are hard technology problems these entrepreneurs are solving. So I think we are poised for greatness because in terms of the innovation ecosystem, we're starting to build that up around IITM. Go ahead.
So my name is Sripati. I'm batch of 2002 and having a snapshot of when I graduated and what I'm hearing today, I can clearly see the message of liberation. So that, it was very nice to hear that. And I see the students are much more equipped today to be more current, and the fact that the curriculum is changed to reflect what is needed. But I also want to ask what's being done to keep the basics very strong in terms of the fundamentals of what they learn, in addition to just being able to produce or be entrepreneurial to be current. And also I want to ask a question on, touch on the topic of, the Department of Physics and Chemistry and Mathematics, the pure sciences. What is the status? And what is the status of the humanities department, which I think I didn't appreciate
It's
then.
a lot of questions in one.
Which I didn't appreciate then, but the entrepreneurs of today, I think, will gain a lot from such fields. So these are the questions.
Okay. So I think, in terms of, I think, we still, IIT's curriculum is always focused on fundamentals. I think all the classes, the formula is very simple. As long as we hire, as possible, all faculty who are really sound fundamentally or really good, but at least a large number of them, I think most of the courses will be of that kind. Okay, so that is still very much true. I think we don't focus so much on giving information or domain knowledge. That is incidental. Try to always, most of the faculty are trying to make the students figure out how to think. That remains, I think, the basis. So second question with regard to the science departments, I think they are doing very well. Maths, physics, physics and chemistry particularly are doing very well. Physics department is, and of course in IIT Madras, I think it's maybe true for most IITs. So physics departments are, half of it is actually, condensed matter physics, a lot of it is almost material science. Okay, only half of our physics department would be in theoretical physics or in, the other branches. So they are very prolific in that sense, and they do a lot of work on materials and material properties, magnetism, the magnetics, those kind of stuff. The maths department too, these are all growing. Maths is quite a big department now. And but overall, I would say in general in India, I would think the intensity of mathematics research is not enough. This is not just IIT Madras, overall. When I recruit faculty, the harder departments to recruit for are mathematics and humanities. So humanities department has also grown because we started as MA program. I don't know if this is after your time, from 2006 onwards. So they have also grown. We offer now, the new curriculum offers complete freedom to students to up to 8 or 9 courses. They can do whatever they like, which could be in all humanities courses also, if they want to, right? And there are all kinds of courses being offered in the humanities department now. We do use a lot of guest faculty also, because ultimately we have only one humanities department. We don't have psychology and different departments. So we do rely on, the city has other people. We try to bring them in as guest faculty. That's what we do.
Sir?
Hello, my name is Anant Reddy. I'm MTech Computer Science 1984, and I couldn't crack JEE, so I didn't go to undergrad, so I went to master's. I cracked the gate and then went to master's. My question is, looks like CFI is doing a great job at IITM and helping all these students in entrepreneurship and all that. Are there any plans to scale that out to the next tier of universities, like Osmania University or any state-level universities, to take it to either funded by the state governments or private industry or school or universities themselves?
And you mean by IIT or?
No, is IITM or anybody is doing an effort to scale the same concept to the next tier of universities?
So one of the people that was instrumental in making CFI happen at IIT Madras was Professor Idi Chandy. Professor Idi Chandy was the Dean of Students at that time when we had our Silver Union back in 2006. And some of my batchmates who are here will remember that he actually came to the resort where we were having the reunion and really made, I would say, an impassioned pitch for creating the Center for Innovation. I think he and also a couple of our batchmates, including Shankar, were really the people that had the vision of what the center could accomplish. So since then, of course, Professor Idi Chandy also served as deputy director, and he has now retired. And he has really become an evangelist for Center for Innovation. He has actually visited several colleges who have used him as a consultant to create similar centers, several colleges in Kerala. And in fact, one of his ideas, which I'm hoping will happen sometime, is to create a central Center for Innovation in the city, in Chennai, that multiple colleges could actually have access to. Because I think it's somewhat impractical, given the number of engineering colleges in Tamil Nadu and around Chennai, to have one of these centers, and it's probably also not cost effective. So I think what we can maybe think about are centers that can serve to clusters of engineering colleges. It is certainly being worked on. Many people at IIT Madras are keen on it, and everybody that visits CFI is so impressed that they want their own. And so we just have to come up with the right strategy for doing that, but we are working on it, yes.
I'm curious about how successful are we with recruiting these days vis-a-vis, let's say, 5 years ago, or in comparison to, let's say, IIT Bombay and so on. The other question is, traditionally the IIT
One question, Mohan.
Okay. I mean, these are short ones.
Yeah. Well,
and nobody is behind me.
We never know. There is one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, most of the IITs, including IIT Madras, including the new IITs now, in fact, Palakkad and Tirupati and others, Goa and others just went around through recruiting, through round recruiting. I think recruiting is quite okay. There is a steady rate at which you have to recruit. You can't suddenly fill up the post the way Parliament wants us to do it. But the rate of filling up is quite good compared to the rate of retirements, and all the IITs are growing in that respect. Actually, the availability of candidates who want to be faculty is increasing, and we are also raising the bar. We are becoming more choosy. That if you ask me, the biggest challenge now is not in getting candidates who are competent, who know or seem to know what they're doing and what they're working on, but actually to look for candidates who can handle change. The hardest part is figuring out who is which candidate 20 years down the line can be working in a completely different field. And that's the hard one actually, and because that's what you have to do, and that is from a recruiting point of view, that's the challenge. We get enough candidates, and most IIT Madras, if you ask me, we are adding about 30 to 35 new faculty per year net of retirement. Sometimes it drops to 27, 28, and that's enough. We need to grow to 700 plus by 2020 or 2021, and we are on track. And I don't want to go any faster. It's perfectly fine. So we have to keep recruiting. We do it in a sort of a planned fashion twice a year, but Bombay and everybody else is doing the same. There's no big difference. Yeah.
So we have another hour plus ahead of us. But before we wrap up this session, one, I'd like to thank Director Bhaskar and Professor Nag for initiating this summit as a pilot, as he said. I think it's been a phenomenal way for us to spend a day together and learn more about what IITM has been doing. They will be here for the next hour and a half as we go through a reception and networking session. So let's give them a big hand. And before we wrap, I'd like to invite Vijay Ullal to the stage. Vijay is the chairman of the IIT Madras Foundation that was formed about a year and a half ago, and he's been a phenomenal driving force to get this thing off the ground. So I'd like him to say a few words.
I know I'm really biased. I'm not only an alumnus, but I'm also been involved with the foundation. But even if I try to strip that bias away, I have to say that what we have witnessed today is really phenomenal. This institution has really transformed. You know, I mean, it's of course from when I went to school, 1980s, when I graduated, it's really changed. But I think, you know, you heard from somebody from your 2002 batch, he sees the change. It's palpable, right? And I think there's no question where it starts from. Bhaskar, I think we have to thank him for his leadership. I was talking to Professor Mohan, and he tells me that IIT Madras and Bombay have separated themselves from the pack. But I know in one way, IIT Madras is clearly ahead of IIT Bombay, is the way the institute interacts with alumni. There's no question that that is because of Dean Nagarajan. And he has been a single one-man fundraising machine, you know, and now we're trying to keep up with him. I want to thank the faculty for coming here. Truly impressive group. Thank you all. Don't take this the wrong way, faculty, but the startups were much more impressive. Of course, they stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before them. When I listen to them, I feel like dropping everything, going back to school there. I want to also thank, I can't thank all the volunteers, there's so many people. But Seshan, where are you? And we roped in, Girish made the mistake of saying, hey, IIT Madras Foundation, you guys are doing a good job. So I immediately roped him in. I don't think he's ever going to say anything positive to us. And of course, all the panelists, the moderators, unfortunately couldn't watch them all, but thank you all for making this such a wonderful occasion. I want to say one last thing. There's one controversial question, it has to be one, right? But you may make a good point. So, yeah, number one engineering institution in India. You know, you can debate about what that means. I want to tell you what I observe when I compare IIT Madras to MIT or Stanford or UC Berkeley. The number one difference that I see is the level of interaction between the institute and the alumni. And there is no problem, in my opinion, from the institute. They're open. So it is up to us to, you know, reciprocate. So you all given a lot of your time. I really appreciate the fact that you're all here. Let's not make this a one-day event. Let's make sure we go back to the institute. Let us form these bonds. Let's strengthen the bonds with the faculty, with the startups, help them when they come here. And I think that is the number one thing we can do to make this a premier institution. And I have no doubt that's going to happen. Thank you all.
Before we wrap here, I think Next on the agenda is our reception and networking, which is in Salon D and E. They are renaming it Tharams for the evening. But before we disband, I'd like the faculty and the entrepreneurs who are here on the panel to stay back a bit. You'll still get a chance to enjoy the reception and network with the rest. They're not going to keep you here, but we would like you back here for a brief few minutes. So with that, I think bring the day to a close. Enjoy the reception next door.